Welcome to another episode of Playing Injured. I have my neighbor here, actually, Anthony Amunategui. He's the founder of CDO Group and the host of the Future Factory podcast. Can't forget about that. Anthony, how are we feeling tonight?
Josh, I am so glad to be on your show. I love your show. The work that you're doing is amazing, and I'm so delighted to be on here. Thanks for allowing me to come on your show.
Usually I start the podcast off with asking folks who they are, how they spend their time, but I want to change things up because something interesting we did before the podcast. We actually sat down and said a prayer together right before. And I want to know how important is kind of the spiritual side for you when it comes to being a serial entrepreneur, wearing a bunch of different hats and living the life that you do.
Josh, I spent a lot of time in early life in religion, and it never quite made sense to me, right? I just couldn't understand it. There was this conflict I had between these rules and this. But I love the community part of it, right? There's definitely a part of it that I loved, right? It was a community part, the part that we service each other, where we serve each other. And there's and I've spent a lot of time traveling this world. I've been with religious leaders around the world. I've been with Krishnas and Muslims and just about Sikhs and Mormons. And, for me, the journey is really to hear the message and try to understand God or this higher power, this being that's there. And the best I can get to this point is that religion feels a lot like 2-year-olds describing algebra, right? Mm-hmm. When I hear the religious part of it, it just sounds a little bit like kids trying to describe this being that all is. And the best I can find is that I hear, the God in me bows to the God in you, that somewhere in our voices, when we're in service of each other, I've noticed that there's a reverence to that that's different than any religion could ever bring. Right. As we help each other up, as we work together, this planet, to me, we're drinking off a fire hose. I mean, today, I am, we're busier. The companies I own are more dynamic than ever. And the people I work with are just struggling, right? They're struggling to stay in. Their attention spans are gone. Their frustrations are up. Getting anything done is just overwhelming. And I just notice that when we take a moment to be together in service of each other, there's a glow to it. There's a vibration to that. And I don't know if you describe that as God. I mean, it seems like an easy way to spell it, but there's a vibration to that feels right. And I think that's the part of my upbringing of church that I loved, was that part where we served each other.
100%. I believe in that. And for me, as I've gotten older, I've started to really, I guess, come in tune more with that spiritual side, reading, folks like Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, and how important their teachings are, and how I just receive what they talk about in life. It's all about, being kind and helping others, having grace, right? That positive vibrations that people can feel on you, and you become extremely attractive. People that, people want to follow you. People want to get connected with you when you bring your best foot forward. And like you said, we're all drinking out of a fire hose. How can we all help each other out? I
really feel like my first 48 years on the planet, you ever let a dog off a leash?
Oh,
right?
100%.
You let the dog off a leash, and it just runs around sniffing everything.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like my first years on the planet were much like that. A wonderful adventure of just, eating pizza and, running around and, jumping in the bushes and all the stuff that came along with the discovery of the planet, right? It's just we live in the most magical time ever it existed. I mean, this planet has so much abundance. It blows me away. I mean, I was at Costco today, and you can't just buy 6 bagels. You got to buy 12. Or no, 6 muffins. You got to buy 12. They're like, no, sir, you have to have a whole nother. I'm like, I only want 6. They're like, no, you have to take 12. I'm like, the abundance of our lives is overwhelming. And, so we have so much. And at the same time, there's a feeling of just overwhelmingness, right? That drinking off the fire hose feeling, that sense that, it's so abundant, but yet I don't know what to do. right? I just noticed today, I had a conversation with a leadership group on one company I have, and I said, you ever notice that? I mean, even myself, how many things I start but never finish. I'm in dozens. We live an ADD life, and people want
Yes.
to medicate us. I'm like, I got to make, but we're these creative beings living in such an abundant world. I'm like, do I want to do this, or do I want to do this, or do I want to do this, or do I want to do this? There's just so many things to do, and that's the part of us that is the opportunity, right? That's the glorious part of being a human in this time, is that there's an overwhelming amount of abundance. Now, what stops that from us? Where are we perceived as injured, right? Sometimes I even call myself broken in some spots and go, all right, what's stopping that energy from kind of getting creative? Why am I not feeling that abundance feeling? What's the sense I need to stop that? And I'm sure we could talk a little bit more about that.
I think about my generation, right? That we're not necessarily lazy, right? I wouldn't say that we're lazy, but we are distracted.
Yeah.
Which then causes us to be unproductive. It's hard to focus, right?
Sure.
You can forget your vision, your dreams, things that you have in your mind like this. Because you see something on Instagram, you see somebody that's doing something that looks great, and you'll forget your own vision, your own purpose. As a CEO for you, a leader, how have you kind of kept that vision in front? And I know you kind of say you struggle with it as well, right? You have a bunch of different things, right?
No one's getting out of this unscathed. I mean, the ones that you see that act like they have it all together, it's just as much a show as the ones who are acting insane, right? I mean, it's just a prettier show. But what's one of the things I always feel like I'm lucky in that in my early years we didn't have all these computers, right? You kind of had to chop wood, carry water, play with sticks, go outside, and you were bored. You had a chance to be bored. My kids today have no shot in hell of ever being bored, and maybe not bored in the way that I would say bored. Like we have one or two thoughts at a time, and places where the day's a little slower. Today, there's just so. I mean, I watch my kids every break they have. They've got the phone. They've got this. There's so much communication coming at them. It's wonderful. And like you said, it's really distracting. And how do we get to, when I look at I'm related to construction, right? Because the biggest company I have is called CDO Group. And in that one, this last year, we were 80% higher in volume. And I just noticed that the projects that we're having are so much more difficult to get done. And my sense is exactly that. There used to be a time when you had a problem and you would hunt it down all the way till the solution happens. Now it feels like you just get a problem, you identify it, and you talk about it a little bit, and then there's four of the things that come at you, right? And then you forget about it. And then all of a sudden, the next week I go back and I'm like, man, I was going to fix that thing. And I got the guy on the phone. I was going to call him and do that. And I started working on that, but then I forgot. And it feels like Groundhog's Day. I'm like, man, I got to get back in that problem, figure out where that guy's at. He said he was going to show up on Friday, but last Friday he never showed up. It's Thursday already today. How do I get him back out here? And those half-finished ideas are happening to everybody. Like the people the vendors that we work, the subcontractors we work with, they all want to make money. And it's such an abundant time to make money, right? In the construction world right now, there's just so much great work going on. And when you can't finish something, it's frustrating because we have projects all over the country that are having delays because they can't get products, and they can't get things done. The cities that we're working with are taking, I mean, to get a permit out of a lot of cities today, multiples. I mean, the amount of time it's in multiples, right? I mean, we used to take 4 or 6 weeks. Today, I just got one in Pembroke Pines, 9 months to get a permit. Just say, here's my plans. 9 months later, I get a permit back from the city saying you can start construction. That's how you start, right? Just imagine that. Like you're all ready to go, hot and heavy, ready to roll on something, and it takes 9 months just to get the permit to start. Now, once you're under construction, all the delays of getting the parts and pieces and the people to do it, they're all going through the same exact experience, right? That thing you talked about where we have these half-baked ideas and we can't quite finish the thought or carry it to fruition, right? The entrepreneur who has a great idea, but between great ideas and happening, right? There's really the whole idea behind development of any company or any idea is expand and organize. I mean, if you look at the fundamentals of what it is to build a company, it's always the same. I'm going to expand and organize. Now, I mean, Josh, how hard is it to, even when we're putting together a podcast, you and I are both in the podcasters, and just as the idea of creating a podcast, which is, we both love doing this. Pre-show, we talked about how much fun we have doing this, and
Yeah.
I can tell by your all your shows are always just, there's so much great information. You're so into it. And I know that feeling. And at the same time, how do I organize this into something that I can grow and sustainable, and something I can survive off of and flourish off of, right? I mean, that organized part for it is overwhelming.
It is. It is. It is. You talk about that, you expand, you organize, and you continue to go through that. And, when it comes to finishing, right? And I think accountability comes up, right? And integrity to self. As an entrepreneur, that is huge. That's those two are pretty big. Accountability to maybe folks, who you said that you would do this. You had to be a man of a word to yourself, because now, what people don't realize is, like, yeah, I want to own my own company, but okay, the work, you also have to do the work too. It's two ends of the stick.
That's right.
And then integrity with yourself, right? That's how you actually grow. And that's how you actually, trust yourself to grow and expand, right? How is those two things? You have to be strong in those areas. Accountability.
Look, to me, it's like a peephole that I'm looking through. Sometimes I see it, and I got it. I got clear view through it. And there's other times I lose it. I get it. I don't get it. I get it. I don't get it. I get it. Don't get it. It comes and goes, right? The whole idea behind expanding and organizing, right? What's right between the two of those, right? So I expand. I had an idea, right? Start a podcast. I'm going to start a podcast. I want to speak to great leaders around the world. I want to bring great messages and help others see some great ideas and share great ideas with others. Well, now in the middle of that, I want to get to organize, where it becomes a business, it's sustainable, it's good. But in the middle of it, it's confusing as hell, right? I would say the middle part, right between expand and organize, is, I mean, it'll frustrate the bejesus out of you. I mean, they're literally, how much marketing do I do? How do I get myself on YouTube? How do I get myself over here? How many messages do I have to do? How many clips do I need to get before I get paid for this? Am I going to get paid somehow? Is this show going to produce some value for me? How does this ultimately become a business that I can run? And all of the things it takes to go in between that can be overwhelming. And, a big part of what you were talking about, I love that piece about commitment. For me, there's a big part of it for me that, I watch myself and my energy levels as I go through life. And a lot of what I carry with me is some baggage, right? There's some real baggage in some of the upbringings I had. I have stories that I carry that don't serve me. My mother worked at Denny's. I can tell you that I used to blame that on why I was poor, right? Oh, well, my mother worked at Denny's, and if you had my upbringing, and my father died young, and I never was good at spelling. I have all these things that, sometimes I relate it to like a Santa bag. You ever see Santa Claus? He carries that big giant red bag. Mm-hmm. Right. And I've carried that red bag over my shoulder. And a lot of times I find that the weight of that slows me down. I notice that I'm not dancing on this planet, because, look, there's a billion things we can do every day, Josh, right? Every day there's a billion things I can do. Now, the truth is, I'm weighed down by that bag of crap, right? I carry with me the pains of kids should be seen and not heard. Some of my parents, my mother's biggest dream for me was to be a butcher. She was like, hey, look, you're not really great at school, but why don't you get a trade, right? When you get a trade, and if you get a trade, if you're a butcher, you'll always be able to bring meat home, and you'll always get paid a decent salary. You can get a job at any supermarket in the world. And, for a woman who came from an immigrant who came from Italy, that sounded like a great idea, right? It's a safe way to grow a family. And had I done that, I'm not sure that life wouldn't have been bad, but I wouldn't have the life I live today, which is, this discovery, this play I get to do. And, but as you started, there was a time in my life when I was young, and I started to notice some of these behaviors that I was at cause for the life that I was living. And I couldn't see that before. Before, I was a victim to it. I was a victim to the life I was living because of, my upbringing, my financial, my parents, all that stuff. I was a victim to that. And one day I took a course, and I'll share a little bit about the course. I was young.
I love it.
And a friend of mine, his name is Lance. He said, hey, I'm going to take you out to dinner. I'm like, what? Yeah, I'm gonna take you out to dinner. I'm gonna take you out to this fancy restaurant down in Miami. I go, okay. He goes, hey, but you got to bring $50. Wait, hold on. You're taking me out to dinner, but I got to bring $50. Who's taking who out to dinner? So I was like, don't worry about it. We're gonna stop by this thing. I'm gonna check. Check out this course I took. You'll love it. We're gonna stop by. Let's like a little meet and greet with them. And I'm like, oh great. I walk in this hotel and people are all like over nice. They're all like looking at you like, hi, and they put a name tag on me and they're like, hi Anthony, I'm Bob, and Bob's there. Bob's looking at me like, hey, glad to have you here, Bob. I'm like, oh, what the hell's going on here? They're like too nice. And he goes, hey, where's that $50? I go, all right, here, I got $50. And he hands it to the lady at this little fold up table, and she's like, great. He goes, oh, by the way, you owe her 240 more bucks. Yeah, I just signed you up for this course. I'm like, what? So the course was a course done by a company called Landmark Education, and it was called The Forum. And I'm 17 years old, and I go to this course, and it was 3 days: a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and a Tuesday night. And in that course, it was great, right? It was the first time I'd ever taken. It was like a Tony Robbins or a deal. It was a course where I started to learn some distinctions, and one of the distinctions I learned was my story, right? Like what happened, and my story about what happened. Like a car accident happens and 5 people see it, and there's 5 different stories about it, right?
Yeah.
What happened in life, and then a story about what happened. And I started to notice that I had made up a bunch of stories about my life, and most of them weren't really true. Right. Some of them I had used to survive, and or whatever reason I made up the stories. That was like one of the distinctions. I'm like, that was a good one to get. Like I started noticing that what happened maybe it was different than what really happened. Like for example, my mother worked at Denny's, and if you'd be broke if your mother worked at Denny's, and my mother sent me to private schools. And when I turned that story around, like my mother did anything to give me an education, right? She even worked at Denny's, right? And when I turned that story around, like she sewed clothes. Like in my living room when I was a little kid, there were piles of clothes, and she would sew zippers in for a company. And she has a machine, and she would sew zippers in. And my sister and I would jump from the pile to pile to pile. And some mornings I'd wake up and she'd be sleeping at the sewing machine. And when I started to turn that around, that we were poor, that little woman worked her ass off to give us everything that we have.
Yeah.
Now, how can I be in service of that behavior to my, now when I look at my life and go, I owe her, right? When a woman does that to take care of her kids, right? Maybe how should I show up to say thank you, right? Like sometimes when I sit and watch TV, I think to myself, I might owe a little bit more than this, right?
Yeah.
I might give back. So as I start to look at my story and then what happened, that was a great distinction. They had a great one on choices. How do you make a choice, right? There's decisions, right? Sometimes decisions or reasons are things that push me from fear. Like I want to be rich. Like that's more of an ego getting pushed. But when I want to create a lifestyle that gives me freedom, right? A lifestyle where my family can have what they want, right? A lifestyle where I can help others, right? Where a lifestyle where I can start to be real creative. That's a future that I can live into that actually pulls me forward, right? Instead of being pushed from fear, like I want to keep up with those guys. That's kind of like this fear mentality or maybe shame or guilt, getting pushed from there. And that doesn't have a lot of energy. But when I get up in the morning and I want to create a life that's worth living into, that kind of pulls me forward. So Landmark Education was one of those courses that had, there was like 6 different distinctions. And along a 3-day period, the best one was possibility. Like I didn't understand you could live into a possibility. Like you could create a possibility for your life that didn't exist, right? Like before you walked in, there wasn't this possibility. And then you went to a course and you made a stand, and making a stand for, I'm like, what do you mean making a stand? Well, like, they were like, Anthony, do you know what it means to make a stand for something? I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, what do you mean? Like, well, if you're a father, like, what does it mean to be a father to somebody? Well, if you're make a stand for that kid, you might take care of them, right? You might pay their bills. You're there to support them, right? And you make a stand for those kids, and that ultimately has you make things happen, right? So, possibilities became something I didn't have before I took that course. So a lot of times today, there's where the magic is, that when I get started, I didn't have language to articulate opportunities. When my basket or toolbox was small, it was difficult to have to make great things in life. To make just like a carpenter would have a hard time if he had just one saw. It might be difficult to make a great carving. But as a carpenter, if you ever looked in a carpenter's toolbox, there's hundreds of little screwdrivers and little things and little knives, and they're like little specialty knives. And life's kind of like that, right? As we start to look at life and go, maybe I need some more tools in this box to create the life that I'm getting ready to create, right? Maybe there's some more tools. And to me, courses like Landmark Education or Tony Robbins or Dale Carnegie or great books, they all have some tool that I get from each book. I just Jocko Wilco's the Extreme
Yeah.
Ownership. Great. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a great one. Or I try to read a book a week. Sometimes I can't do a whole book in a week, but in each book, I find a tool that might serve me creating a more creative life than I would have had without that tool. It's a little bit more creative than when sometimes I'll binge watch TV, right?
Right.
Sometimes I go through binge watching. And although I love watching Yellowstone or some great binge watching, I rarely get a great tool out of that.
Yeah. And I guess when you talk about that, right, that tool, when you get done reading a chapter of a book and you get a new perspective that you can now bring into your life, and it's an amazing feeling. Now, in the moment or right before you're opening up that book, it's like, man, I would much rather turn this on TV. Like, honestly, I don't feel like reading a book right now. Honestly, I do not feel like reading. It just doesn't feel like a good moment to read it. And then after you open up the book and you get something out of it, it's such a fulfilling feeling when you're done. And it's like a lot of these moments are actually building our self-esteem and our self-image. Those moments and those things where right before you do it, you don't necessarily feel like it. During it, you probably don't want to do it. But after, you feel amazing about yourself. That's the meditation, that's working out, that's eating healthy. All these things that are positive for us, you don't necessarily want to do them, but after, you feel amazing.
I have days when I'm great at it. I'll give you this week. I wanted to work out 5 days this week. I made it 3 days. And yesterday, I don't know why, I got my shoes on. And for me, I have to kind of set them up early, and I get my shoes by where I want. And so, the hardest part is getting from my bed to my sneakers on. Right? Usually, when I get my sneakers on, I'm heading to the gym. Right? Yesterday, I had the weirdest experience. I knew better than to do what I did. I was tired. I got dressed. I was in my car. I was in front of the gym, and I answered a phone call. And instead of saying, "Hey, I'm going to the gym. I'll call you afterwards," I sat and dove into it. And the truth is, like, sometimes I can get off. Like I've gone through many, many experiences in life. One time I was a drinker. One time I was a smoker. One time, all the things that come along with drinking drugs and all the stuff that happened in my life. And then I found a way to find some clarity where I stopped doing all those. Right. But then I can get just as high today on other things. Right. Like, I can get off on, like, yesterday morning, I got a little high, and it's funny to say this way, right? So I got a little high on the drama of, we've got about $10 million worth of construction going on in Phoenix. And there was a little problem with the team out there, and it started at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm standing in front of the gym. It was just before 5, and I'm getting ready to walk in. And so it's 4 o'clock in the morning in Phoenix. I get a phone call about some people worked all night long, and there's something there. And I just jumped into the drama. And just as much as I knew better, I didn't go into the gym. I know that if I go in the gym, right, ultimately I feel really great on the outside. And the funny thing about that was, I didn't go in the gym again today. As much as there's days when I feel like a genius and I feel like there's wonderful stuff going on, I went right at the office again today, right? And I noticed, I said, wow, what was that had you not go to the gym 2 days in a row? And for me, I got high on drama. And tomorrow, and it really, that's a hard one to, like, describe, right? And just, you ever get higher on anger? You ever wake up in the morning with, like, an angry hangover?
Oh, 100%.
Right. I mean, you can be just as hungover on anger as any pill or drink I ever drank. And the same thing can happen. Same thing can happen with emotions, right? There's emotional sobriety, And that's a real nuance to look at as you grow as a leader, right? If I really want to bring, the top level energy to the day that I am, right? The days that we create, I need to look at the food I eat, the workout that I have, and the emotional condition that I bring to the room, right? So when I show up to the room and I'm frantic, it's very difficult to be a great leader. Leadership to me is all about one thing: bringing ideas to problems, or creating, right? Creating out of nothing, bringing all the ideas of the world, right? Great leaders take the billions and billions and billions of ideas of the world and they bring it to a problem, to a solution, right? They bring it to it and they create solutions from all the ideas. Now, for me, when I'm not there, great managers, they follow lists. I do this, then I do this, then I do this. That's not what, that's a different role. They're great roles. Right? Some people do really great at that role, and that's a wonderful role. But I enjoy being, a leader of, creating companies. And when I don't go to the gym, like today, I felt all day long, I struggled, right? And that just has me check out. I don't have the creativity. I don't have the clarity of vision. I don't bring to it solutions. So I knew that this morning, and I had to move a little slower today. I went and I had a meeting with the leadership group, and I sat down. I kind of told on myself. I said, "Hey, look, this is what happened. I didn't go to the gym today, and I'm feeling a little shame around it." I said, "I'm going to need to check out a little bit. And just today, I'm going to move a little slower. And would you guys mind having a little bit of grace for me?" And that part about grace that you were talking about was just such a beautiful spot. When we have people that we have trust around us, we can ask for that. Hey, I just noticed that today I'm in a funky space, right? I was triggered by what's going on in Phoenix, right? I sometimes as a leader think to myself, what kind of leader has a company where there's drama out in a marketplace, right? We have this. I hold myself accountable for what's happening out there, right? Where am I not supporting the team of people that are out there that need support? Now, some of that's ego, right? Some of that's just ego, and some of that stuff is actual need to be of service to the group that you're developing, right? That region's growing, it's expanding, and right now it's in the middle of confusing as shit, right? And I need to organize. I need to spend real time organized. So I spent really good time today just trying to start an idea and trying to finish it, right? We went through some very, very particular things to get what I call datums, right? As when you're really struggling, right? When you're really having a tough time with developing something, do you know what a datum is?
I don't. Datum.
Right. So Chicago has a datum, and I believe it's on the corner of LaSalle and Madison. It's a little marker, right? And it's on the side of a building, and that little marker is where when you say I'm going to Chicago, that's where it measures, right? When you say from Chicago to Milwaukee, it measures from that datum point to,
okay.
Right? So it's the point by which all the height of the city is measured. It's the point by which all the distance from the city is measured. That marker is called a datum. So it's one stable point. Now, whenever I'm developing something, right, I'm developing a company or a process, I want to start to create one stable datum at a time, right? So like for the podcast, one of the things that we start off every week when I meet with my podcast team, I start off by saying, let's just go through data. How many listeners do we have? How many downloads do we have? How many new interactions do we have on each one of the different platforms? We look at real just data, right? Like what's the data? Not the story about the data, not why it's happening, but just really how many downloads do we get on YouTube? How many downloads do we get on Spotify? How many downloads do we get on across the board? And that's kind of a good way to start with. Just that's a datum. Now, how do I start putting processes for each of those platforms together so that I can start to grow them? And one of the things we figured out was we would break these numbers, but we could never get past these 20,000 downloads a week. We're like, all right, why are we not getting these downloads? Why can't we go past that? And one of the things we noticed was the name we had originally was the Future of Development Podcast.
Yeah.
Future of Development Podcast. It was almost 30 letters. And I hired a company to come in and look at it. They're like, listen, first of all, your name's freaking too long. By the time people type it in, they've already found 5 other podcasts to go listen to. I was like, what? They're like, yeah, I love the name. But like, well, yeah. So we went out and did some research. We found a name, Future Factory, right? It
Yep.
kind of gave the same thing where it kind of gave the future idea. It gave it a much wider arch to go underneath, so I can do things like artificial intelligence and AI and machine learning and, new technologies and construction methods and robots and all that kind of fun stuff. But I also can do some great stuff on human growing and human growth and personal development. And it kind of gives a much larger archway for me to bring in different guests. So again, as you start to work with data, right now you get one data point at a time and try to get it stable so that you have a data, each one becomes a data that you can measure from. And I feel like that's a good spot to work in. And the same thing happens with us as personal
As
development,
humans. Yeah.
right?
One thing you mentioned, a great leader. I think what you're showing now is great leadership, and that's humility, right? Having a high self-image and a high self-esteem, and coming here and saying, "Hey, I made a mistake. I'm not perfect. I still mess up on my routine." I think a lot of folks get the notion of that CEOs and serial entrepreneurs and people who are ultra successful are perfect and on it every day, right? And so if we miss a day, we feel out of it. We feel not good enough. We feel like, we feel shame. I missed another day. I missed another time, and that rebound time can be a little bit longer, right? Because we feel like the people that we aspire to be are perfect. And they don't make mistakes. And so being able to have a leader say, "Hey, yeah, I make mistakes." And the next day, hey, it's a new day. Let's get back to it and let's grow. And that's something that I think more folks need, is some humility. And it shows that you have a high self-image. You have a high self-esteem. You're not worried about the validation and approval of other folks. You're here to be honest and here to help. And I think as a leader, that's one of the most important things that folks need, is some authenticity, and to see that, hey, if I mess up, I can still be okay. I just need to show up the next day.
It's hard, right? I mean, so it's hard in this Facebook, Instagram world, to be vulnerable, right? Ultimately, the question is, if you're going to grow, how vulnerable are you willing to be? Because look, there are plenty of people who are a one song hero, right? They have one thing they're really good at. The one restaurateur that just ran a great restaurant, but tried to go do anything else, they fell apart. In order to be really, really vulnerable, right, to grow, right, to continuously evolve. And truth is, I think that's the joy of the planet, right? The whole joy of being on who we are. I could talk about all kinds of other things that I love. One of the greatest books I ever read to me is called Many Lives, Many Masters. And it happened to be right while my mother was dying. This is a great book. It's about a psychiatrist who helped people with phobias, and he would hypnotize them back to the original place, spider bite, or they fell in the dark, or they almost drowned in the water, and they'd go back to where someone's phobia was started. They kind of go back to that point. And one day he discovered that he could go through someone's life. And he worked with this girl who ended up going, he did some work with her on phobia and thought he had found it. And she came back the next week and she had the same phobia. And he's like, "Wow, what happened? Let's go back there and really see if we can find it again." Right. It's always about retuning the story where the phobia started. And he does some hypnosis with her and he gets her back into place. And he actually goes through her life into another life. He's like, "Is this real?" The whole time he's like, but she's describing these things about wars that she couldn't possibly know about, right? And he ends up doing this 60 more times with this patient. And he ends up finding out he could do it with other patients. And look, I don't know if I've had many lives, right? But I do have a sense that life is short, right? I noticed that my useful time on the planet to really get stuff done is short, right? When I first got here, I spent my early years running around like a puppy dog, sniffing all the things I could sniff and eating all the pizza I could eat, right? It was like, oh my God, there's pizza here, right? This planet's a lot of fun. And discovery was great, and girls and all that. Now I'm in the process of really getting something done, right? And those years are limited, right? And the amount of focus that it takes and the amount of baggage that I've carried may limit my ability to be effective. But if I really want to be effective in this now time, I've got to get rid of that bag of Santa Claus stuff. Right? That whole bag of stuff, that bag of crap that doesn't serve my life. And frankly, I can't do that alone. I have this built-in forgetter, or this built-in liar, right? The guy in my brain, I call him Fred, right? Fred in my head. Fred's kind of a jerk, right? Fred makes up that everything I do is okay, right? He tells me, hey, you don't need to go to the gym today. Come on, you worked hard. Look, you're very successful. You don't need to go to the gym. You're fine. Like, just lay in bed. Come on, your beautiful wife's sitting right over there. You could cuddle with her. Just lay there. And then for the rest of the day, I feel tense and stressed out. Or, hey, forget, just watch here. Go flip through YouTube. Forget, there was the last part of last year. I got on a cycle of getting on Instagram and all this. It was like I'd go to, before I went to bed, I wasn't reading. I just started flipping through those Instagram videos. I started noticing my reading dropped way off, and I would start noticing I wasn't sleeping as well. And for a New Year's resolution, I have no social media, and it's a little hard. It's like a detox for me. It's like literally, oh my God, what about people are talking on there? I don't look at it at all. I have other people that look at it and tell me some numbers for the podcast and some of the social media stuff that we do for other companies, but I don't go anymore. And I've noticed my reading's gone dramatically up again. Right, I can knock off 50 or 70 pages in a book every night, and for me, that's like my form of meditation. Right, like I notice that I don't do a very good job of sitting and just like, like that meditation doesn't normally work really well for me yet. I mean, maybe I will one day, right? Today, it doesn't feel that way, but I notice that when I read, right, I have one thought at a time. I can read. It used to be I would read and I couldn't remember the beginning of a sentence. And then I noticed I would read a paragraph. I couldn't remember the beginning of a paragraph. And then I would notice that sometimes I'd read a whole page. And I couldn't remember what the start of the page was. And then sometimes I'd realize I'd wake up in the morning. I couldn't remember what I read last night. Well, slowly but surely, as I get back into it, that becomes a practice that doesn't happen, right? That becomes a form of meditation, like one I never had before, right? And to me, I've felt a lot more healthy in that regard. When I go to bed at night, if I can knock down, anywhere north of 50 pages, that feels like, and I fall asleep with my brain just kind of, sometimes I even fall asleep with a book in my hand, and I can put it away and fall asleep real comfortably. And, that to me felt like a great meditation. Oftentimes when I do that, I feel like I go to the gym in the morning a little bit better, right? Those are the days where I don't. This week, I went to bed, with lots of, I've had lots of stuff about this Phoenix market. I carried that into my bedroom. I woke up at 3:00 in the morning answering emails to people. I'm like, all right, that's a no-no. Don't ever look at your phone in the middle of the night. But it's like literally an addiction, right? I'm like, oh, I gotta go check that phone in case something happened in Phoenix. The truth is, I can let that go. Just like I let go. I never thought I could let go of social media, right? But it's been a couple months now. It's February, and maybe it's just been just a month and a couple of days. So
it feels like a few months.
Feels like a few months, right? But it's been a little bit of time of going through this, and I'm just noticing that those changes, those adaptations, as we evolve, it's uncomfortable. I can tell you, every time I've grown a new company or done something new, I feel stupid. I feel like a fraud. In fact, I still say that I get up every morning. I'm still defending that I'm not good enough every day. Right? There's still this little bit of sense of me. No matter how good I get, that one day you guys are all going to find out that I'm a fraud. Right? There's a little bit of that sense inside of me. My guess is it's inside of a lot of us, right? That we have the sense that maybe they're going to find out I'm not. So I defend it, right? I defend it and I hide it. And so if I can be vulnerable and say, yeah, hey, I feel like a fraud too, right? I didn't make it to the gym yesterday. I was talking to that group this morning. I didn't make it to the gym, and I was like, hey, I feel really vulnerable about that. So I think in that vulnerability you were talking about, I think that's where there's some great work of where this world's going. It's going to get so much faster and faster and faster with artificial intelligence. What's coming at us now is amazing. That Josh, that next level of our world is happening so much. It's going to be so much cooler and continue to be cooler and so much more abundant, and it's going to be overwhelming.
First of all, having grace, because the world, hey, these products are built to take our attention and kind of built to, hey, we're human at the end of the day, right? And we're not perfect, and it's okay, right? And things will get overwhelming. And for you, although you still mess up some things, I do understand, to have the success that you've had, you had to have some focus. You've had to have some focus, right? Yeah. And what advice would you give for folks to stay focused? Is it having those boundaries, having that boundary of no Instagram, no social media, no phone before the gym, no phone at night in the bedroom? Is it having those boundaries, or, have you stayed unbelievably focused and kind of kept visions in front of you when everything gets overwhelming?
So this is one of the spots where I'm really uncomfortable telling people how to do it, because it sometimes sounds like judgment, right?
Yeah.
But for me, it's never been. I've never known. In fact, I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. Right? I still don't know what I want to do. I've realized what I don't want to be in a man. Right? I think I've learned more today about what I don't want. Now, part of that for me, a big part of that for me was getting sober. Right? Like getting to a point where you're in construction, there's a lot of drugs and alcohol, and people love taking you out. I noticed that one of the big ones for me was that one. That was a big one for me, right? I used to smoke a lot of pot, and easy in this now time to get away with it because it's everywhere and everybody does it. It's completely acceptable. Yeah. But I just noticed I had a hard time, really being focused in, have my ability to be present. And I really do believe that a big part of being a great leader is those micro sensitivities. When you walk into a room and when you're physically sober, right? Not just, we're not drinking, not drugs, but then also emotionally sober. You can come in, you can almost feel the room, what's going on with people. You get these micro sensitivities that really help support people, right? And then when I become a servant leader, right? When I stand in, all right, what does this room need to develop, right? When I look at groups of people and say, okay, what do they need to be successful? Therein lies the opportunity to really grow, right? So my early years of being a leader, I had this propensity to take my S out of my chest and walk into a room and show my significance. Look at me, I am great at this. And I had this, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I would say there's a warrior I was a warrior leader, right? If you look back at any of the great warriors of life, the Spartan kings, any of the great warrior, there's something about that what did work. But oftentimes you look back behind you and you're like, there's a lot of dead people behind me, right? And I don't know that that's the life I want to live today, right? That warrior king was great. Today, well, I'd like to be a little bit more reverent. And how can I find, how can I support the people and help them grow? How can I make sure that every day, one of my biggest opportunities I walk in is I look at my kids. All right, how can I be a better father every day, right? How can I spend more time and pay attention, see them? My kids want to be seen, right? Today's time, more than ever, we're missing being seen, right? We're all seeing everybody else, but we don't, for thousands of years, we were tribal. I mean, you and I might have been part of a hunting group, right? You had an elder that walked with you, said, hey, Anthony, walk just like this, make sure you guys, hey, Josh, don't go over those trees over there. Those leaves crackle. You'll scare the animal. You had an elder that told you. Today we get likes, right? We go another level, right? All we want to do is we want to feel like we're advancing, right? And our elders used to do that. Today we're getting a lot of that through computers, and we're missing some of the social interaction, right? So finding groups of people that can help me feel connected and seen, right? That also, those elders had your best interest as you would pass through another category of life. They oftentimes would mark you, right? Or you'd have a talisman or some sort of a enunciation that you were doing good. Hey, Josh, you're doing good. Today, some of that's missing, right? Our families went to, the Industrial Revolution came along, our families went to work and they did exactly what they're supposed to do. They went to work and they did great stuff and they built this amazing country and all this amazing stuff we have. But some of the things that we're missing are that human interaction, that guidance. Yeah. And we wonder why we feel a little bit sick. And we're trying to get that feeling of that sense of okayness, not from our families or from our groups, but we're getting that from medications and drugs and we're masking. So look, my only judgment is that as I started to understand that it was okay to be uncomfortable, and my first couple of months of being sober were really difficult. I joined some great programs and 12-step groups and learning that it was okay to be uncomfortable. I wasn't ever taught that. Like my mother never taught me. My mother, in fact, did the opposite. She always wanted to soothe me and take care of me. Yeah. I wasn't really bred to be uncomfortable. I was kind of bred to have all the comforts of a king. And it was beautiful. And even in my worst struggles, they weren't that bad. I like to pretend like they were bad. Right. They weren't really that bad. And then today I can look and go, okay, I can be uncomfortable. As I develop, I just went through a process where it was a couple years ago where I stepped down as the CEO of CDO Group, or the president of CDO Group. And it was my wife took over the company, and it was this real shocking experience, right? Like I was like, I wanted to try on something new. And so we hire a consultant, and this consulting firm comes in, and they're going to guide us through the evolution of the company. This is right. You're in the middle, like going, all right. I always introduce myself. Hey, I'm Anthony. I'm the president of CDO Group. Right? It gave me significance, like who I was. Right, this little poor kid from Pompano Beach, Florida, is now the president of $100 million company. Look, and there was something about that was really, really wonderful.
Yeah.
At the same time, it was also limiting. Right, you got to where that becomes empty and meaningless. You're like, great. So now I've fulfilled that part of my significance. Now, what if I want to do something different? Right. And so I bring a company in to look at that and see how you're going to do this transition. And one day, a lady comes in and she goes, her name is Lola Wright. Wonderful woman, beautiful woman, right? Redheaded woman. She's a spiritual leader here. She Bodhi Institute. She's a spiritual leader. She goes, walk in my office, and she's tall, right? It's about 6 foot something. And she got red hair. She comes walking in my office. She goes, Anthony, today we're going to lock your door. I'm like, what? She goes, yeah, today we're going to lock your door. I'm like, oh, great. I can focus. I have this open door policy. People walk in my office all day. And I like, today we're going to focus. We're going to lock your door. And I'm like, great. I'll focus. And she goes, no. You're going to stay in here. Well, what? She goes, yeah, quit going out the door and getting into everybody's business. You have this need to be significant by going out there and you help everybody, but you suck all the wind out of the room. They can't lead when you keep taking all the oxygen. Now that hurt. Oh, you mean I'm that kind of leader? You're like, yeah. Every time you walk out there, you hire these amazing human beings and you think you're protecting them. But the truth is they need to grow. So I'm going to give you get to have 6 1-hour meetings a week, and you get to talk to these 6 people. These are your leadership people. And I thought, great, here's what I'll do. I'll make lists and I'll have these things. And all right, I'll go meet with Kevin. Kevin, all right, we're going to make sure that the team has this and budgets and forecasts. And I'm going to have this thing. I'm going to just check with Kevin, make sure he did all his tasks. And today, when I have one-on-ones with people, I've never talked about a thing that we do. I get to find out about them.
Their life. Yeah.
Right? Their life. What's going on with them? How can I support them? How can I help them grow? What are the tools and techniques and things that we can do together where they can grow? How are they doing in their life? And I found out that great leaders know all those tasks. They can figure them out. And if they have any questions, they ask. Right? They're smart enough to ask. You hired smart enough people to know that. And they're going to go through some bumps and grinds. I'm just going to be a little bit of just like I did. And just like even when I was my best, there was always that stuff. So how do you start to look at that and go, I didn't realize that I was the one who stopped our growth, right? As long as I kept walking into rooms and I wanted all the significance, I kept stopping our growth. So how can I look at it and go, that was a shocking one, right? Now, what was fun about that was I got to step back a little bit. I got to start the podcast, right? She said to me, well, look, you're going to have this big gap in your significance. You better find some things to fill that gap in. And so I started a couple of things. One, it was I learned to fly. So I've been taking pilot lessons and learning to fly and fly airplanes. And that's been a wonderful experience. Like now I can fly. I just flew down to Indianapolis and back. Like I can fly planes now. I started the podcast. Right. I've had over a couple hundred podcasts, and now that podcast team has become its own little organization. And I've got to start, so just other thing, a TV show that I never would have been able to do before. Right. These great things that, as long as I just became the president of CDO Group, I was never going to evolve. And every once in a while I get to go back at CDO Group and I get to take off my shirt and show the S on my chest and go fix something.
Right.
Because sometimes that's fun too. But, as we evolve, that's the gift of our human development, right? Start to look at, all right, what are some of these stories that we have? There's actually what's happening, and my stories about what's happening.
Yeah,
maybe I could change, and it creates something completely different.
Yeah, and I'll end off on this because this is crazy. You talk about the stories, and a lot of them are inaccurate, right? About who we are, like. For instance, it can be a gorgeous girl, right? And everybody is scared to talk to her, right? And she's wondering, why is nobody approaching me? And she might go home that day thinking like, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm not, valuable enough, whatever the case may be. And that's the story she'll go home telling herself, when really it was the opposite, right? That's why it's so important to have the approval and validation of yourself, and not have it based off of the president of the company, right? It was the person that you were that was more significant. The one that was able to fly the planes and start a podcast. It was Anthony that was significant, not necessarily the president. And once that was able to be released, I'm sure you felt some type of freedom. It may have been shocking, but I'm sure you found yourself more through the process of it all, which is amazing to see.
There's a thing about being a human I just don't understand. I've never had this place where it just always feels, where I have a coasting feeling, right? In all the successes that I've had, there's kind of a little bit of a nudge as a human to go try on something else.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's in the DNA that I've been given. I don't know if that's a gift or a curse in that, what else can we discover, right? Where else can we go, right? If we can do this, how malleable are we, right? How malleable are we? If I was limited by the story, if I had not found that landmark forum course, what path might have I lived, and what story would I have told myself that sounded, Fred would have, stuck right in there. And, look, Fred doesn't want to change. He wants to justify his ego.
Yes.
And the way he wants to make that guy the best. And it's the old way, the best, to feel stupid, to step out on those thin branches of life, to try on a new experience, takes something. But like you said, when you go there, there's something else that you feel, right? There's another feeling that you have that says, I'm okay. I can feel a little stupid. I can be uncomfortable, and I can still develop as a human, and it's okay. It's actually even quite kind of fun. And actually, the more that you get to do, the more you get to do. But I don't know that there's ever a top where I honestly don't know that I'm ever had a completely satisfied moment. You get glimpses of it, but maybe there's always a little sense of in the human of restlessness.
Wow, I love it, man. And me and you, we can go back and forth.
Yeah.
All night. We can go back and forth all night. But no, I want to know, where can folks find you? I just your presence, your vibrations, I can feel it. It's just amazing to sit down and get a chance to talk with you. And I know you have amazing things going on in the future, right? And so focused on future and the future factory. And I'm excited about your future and what you got going on. Where can folks find you? Where can folks follow your journey and continue to see what you have in store?
I'd love for you guys to come over and see Future Factory podcast. I'd love to have you guys come over and check it out. I'd love that. You can always find me on LinkedIn at Anthony Amunategui, AMUNATEGUI. And you can always find me, you can always email me at anthony@cdogroup.com. And Josh, I got to tell you, I'm so honored to be on your show. The people you have on, to be part of this group and the work that you're doing. It's beautiful. I'm grateful. I really feel honored to be on your show tonight. Thank you.
I appreciate you. You added a lot of value to our community, and folks need to check out your podcast. Like I was telling you before, man, I've seen it grow and it looks amazing. It looks legit, man. It looks legit. You're on YouTube. So I've been taking a look at your YouTube and studying it as we get on YouTube, and sure we'll have this on YouTube here in the next few weeks or so. But man, I am pumped for folks to listen to this, because I know it's a lot of value that we added here. So I appreciate you, man.
I catch you. Thank you, sir.